Good evening. A year is the period of time taken by the Earth to complete a trip around the sun. 365 days, 5 hours, 48 minutes, 45 and 1/2 seconds. A year is also a long chapter in the lives of people, a time in which those lives are profoundly influenced by chance, design, and circumstance. Tonight, we revisit the circumstances and events of 1960 in Oklahoma. Someone once said that news is only history in a hurry. But for 1960, the hurry is almost over. In just over 24 hours, the year 1960 will end, taking with it an amazing tale of men and their follies. But now, while there is still time, let's look at 1960 and remember. Where were you 1 year ago tomorrow night? Or can you recall? Well, you had good reason to celebrate. After all, this was the opening of the soaring 60s, and New Year's Eve was the time to soar. You certainly had lots of company. And politicians were the soaringest of all. Among them, Governor J. Howard Edmondson. Politics was destined to be the big story of the year, and Edmondson started early. The legislature had refused to pass major portions of his reform plan, and the governor now prepared to go directly to the people with initiative petitions. So while the kids played on the mansion swings, their parents were busy inside, attending a series of open house receptions and brewing up strategy for the approaching petition campaign. On January 19th, Edmondson walked down the Capitol Hall, followed by a cart carrying the first of the petitions, while curious clerks looked at the stacks of paper which would so drastically affect the next 12 months.
As I've maintained many times before, I don't think that the petitions, although some of the people seeking control of the Democratic Party believe to the contrary, I don't believe that the petitions have anything whatsoever to do with Democratic organization any more than it does with Republican organization.
Not everyone agreed. One of them was Governor Gary's former press secretary, Marty Howen. As spokesman for county commissioners and Oklahomans for local government, Howen launched a hard-hitting attack. The Attorney General ruled state employees could not vote in party meetings, and Howen and Edmondson were off.
The General was stupid. I think the Attorney General rendered an opinion in keeping with the facts in the case, and I think the Attorney General rendered an opinion which is exactly what the governor would have wanted on the basis of what he said as a candidate more than a year ago.
Well, I don't know what inspired it, but I think it's perfectly obvious that they did not consider the constitutional rights of these state employees when they wrote the opinion.
But the governor did state that the county commissioners had collected $125,000 for our campaign. Now, I appeal to your logic. How do you suppose the governor knows this?
Well, the information was this. First of all, it came from several county commissioners who advised us that at the last meeting of their state association, that each of them, 231 in total, were tapped for $500 minimum apiece.
Now, I think a more likely explanation is that he picked that figure off the top of his head.
Mr. Howen said that that's a lie. Well, if anybody's lying, it's the county commissioners who told us about that.
Every time anyone disagrees with the governor of being called either unmitigated liars or thieves, I submit that many of us who disagree with him and disagree violently on these petitions are sincere, honorable people.
There were also lots of them. The petitions were overwhelmingly defeated, but the governor's special election didn't come until September, and in the meantime, Oklahomans were beginning the rounds of a series of elections. First came the primaries. Muskowski lost his Senate seat to Cleta Rogers. Bill Berry was replaced by James Herod, to name just a couple of the many losers, winners, and changes. But national politics were already crowding in. To town came Senator Lyndon B. Johnson, majority leader and favorite son of Oklahomans like Senator Bob Kerr and former Governor Raymond Gary. Everyone asked the same question: will he run for president?
I'm going to make that announcement today. I am an avowed candidate. And I'm going to carry on, if nominated, the most thorough, diligent, winning campaign that any one man can carry on for the nomination of the United States Senator from Texas.
The question changed from will he run to what did he say? Months later at the Texas convention in Austin, it was still unanswered.
Cannot at this time go through the formality of making an announcement.
Nevertheless, LBJ was on the way, headed for Los Angeles. Ernie Schultz was there.
At the Democratic convention, it was hard to tell the players without a scorecard, especially among the Oklahomans. Governor Edmondson was plugging for Jack Kennedy, but the governor's enemies had taken control of the Democratic Party. Chairman Gene McGill and the delegation were for Lyndon Johnson, except Senator Monroney, who was for Stevenson. Then came the night that Kennedy won.
Do you think Johnson started too late?
No, I think Johnson did what he had to do. He stayed in Washington, took care of his responsibility as majority leader. As soon as it was possible for him to hit the campaign trail, he did so.
Do you think that Kennedy can carry Oklahoma, sir?
Well, we certainly are going to do what we can to help him carry Oklahoma, and we believe that Oklahoma will be in the Democratic column in November.
What, Governor, was your reaction when you were booed by several members of the Oklahoma delegation during your seconding speech?
Well, they're the same fellas that have been doing a little booing back in Oklahoma, so I wasn't surprised.
The Republicans were unanimous for Nixon. Now came the campaign, and the skies over Oklahoma were filled with candidates. Sound the trumpet. Beat the drums. For see, the conquering hero comes. Senator Johnson came back to Oklahoma, this time as vice presidential candidate Johnson, and inevitably an Indian chief. Under his guiding hand, all men became brothers, even Senator Kerr and Governor Edmondson. Then, as the campaign reached its climax and only hours away from the election, Jack Kennedy reached Oklahoma City. The people were ready to vote, and vote they did. In this, the fourth major election of 1960, they stood in line for hours, exhausting the supply of ballots and voting on tablet paper. In all parts of the state, Oklahomans went to the polls and once and for all showed their hand. But other hands were busy now, and they were apprehensive hands. Almost everyone had given Oklahoma to Nixon, privately at least. Now came the test. As the evening wore on here at WKY Television's election headquarters, the totals grew until they approached a landslide. A landslide for Republican Nixon, the greatest margin since 1928. Late that night, Governor Edmondson was understandably bitter.
Governor Gary, very definitely, never was as forceful as he should have been for the presidential nominee, Senator Kennedy. I think he definitely stayed behind the log. And I think that Bob Kerr, by the same token, waited too late also.
But when 1960's last election was finally over, maybe you felt like Bill Beebe. But not all the events of 1960 were political in nature, as we shall see in just a moment. In the past 12 months, two of our reporters have been keeping all of you up to date on news affecting agriculture. To find out what kind of year it's been here on the farm, here's Farm Director Russell Pearson.
The year 1960 has been one that brought both progress and problems to agriculture in Oklahoma, but trying as some of those problems may be, farmers can look back at the past 12 months with considerable pride of accomplishment, for they produced abundantly of the food, feed, and fiber that's needed to keep America healthy and financially strong. For Oklahoma agriculture, this has been a very productive year, and the gross income of Oklahoma farmers and ranchers looks like now it'll be the third highest on record, totaling something like $660 million. But of course, that's gross income and not net income. The rather serious problem of the cost of production as compared to the farmer's cost per unit has had its effect on the net income. From the overall viewpoint, however, farmers can be happy over the results of 1960 and thankful for the technical advances in agriculture brought about through research and education. A new record has been set in wheat production this year, a total of over 121 million bushels, and all but an infinitesimally small percentage of it was of varieties of the highest milling and baking qualities, the kind needed by American industries. In the grain sorghum fields, farmers cashed in on more of the scientific advancements in agriculture with the extra production vigor of hybrid sorghums, which occupied, according to reliable estimates, more than 80% of the Oklahoma grain sorghum acreage this year, with proper fertilizer application and with producers following other good farming practices. Combines harvested more than 23 million bushels of this feed grain and set another new record for Oklahoma. A good cotton crop of 460,000 bales, much of which was harvested rapidly and economically with mechanical cotton pickers and strippers, and other successful crop enterprises all contributed considerably to the income of the Oklahoma farmer. 1960 has been an excellent year in livestock production, with an abundance of native grass, the results of good moisture throughout the year, and with the superabundance of small grain pastures, particularly this fall, farmers and ranchers continued to restock their farms and ranges, and prices, though often not as strong as in some previous years, have been such that Oklahoma's livestock income has totaled somewhere up around $325 million. So, though it's had its rough spots, for agriculture in Oklahoma, 1960 was a year of considerable progress, the benefits of which will be reaped in the future not only by Oklahoma's agricultural population, but also by the rank and file of consumers, the farmer's very valuable customer.
Another of our vital news services here at WKY Television is our weather department. Bob Thomas, how would you describe the past year's weather?
Dick, if we had to summarize 1960's weather in one word, I think it would be extreme. Breaking it down very quickly into the seasons, winter, I guess the main feature we could say here was it was cold. It was the coldest February since 1936 and the second coldest March that we'd had in history. As far as precipitation was concerned, we were below normal, but we did have one feature. Back in January, we ended up with 8 2/2 inches of snowfall on the ground. One other big extreme, as far as barometric pressure was concerned, back in February 9th, the barometer at Will Rogers Field dropped down to 28.81, which was the lowest that had ever been recorded. Summer. We're going to skip spring and come back to that. Here, cool and let's say wet. Temperatures here during the summer months averaged almost 10 degrees below normal. As far as being wet, well, July, for instance, was about 5 1/2 inches above normal. Quite wet. As far as fall was concerned, well, finally temperatures went up a little bit. We might say it was a mild fall. As far as precipitation was concerned, here again, very erratic. For instance, back in October, we were 2 inches above normal, but by the time we hit November, we were 1 1/2 inches below normal. As far as spring was concerned, we had, of course, a very wet spring. Temperatures were close to normal. We set many records, and the big thing was the excessive tornadoes. High-pressure system up in the Arctic region. Also, high-pressure system down in the Gulf. These were the two fighting forces. Ends up frontal systems right on through Oklahoma. To go along with this, for a while we had our jet stream, more or less a zonal flow going from west to east, but this finally broke down and we had a north-south flow about like this, which again added support to the surface to give us our weather extremes. Now, one thing was that we finally had some research begun here at Oklahoma. And to give you a little bit more details on that, here's Virgil Dominic.
The year 1960 was marked many months ago as the year in which man would try to find out more about the mechanism of violent thunderstorms. The laboratory was the sky over Oklahoma, where by early spring the thunderheads were beginning to build. A task force of scientists was assembled to study the storms. A big new radar set was installed at Will Rogers Field to peer into the interior of the coming clouds. flying laboratories went aloft to fly through the thunderstorms to gather data. The Air Force joined the effort and sent jets out from Tinker to study the formation of the storms and their effect on aircraft. The information they gathered will be useful in years to come, but it could not help in 1960. As spring came in, the storm fronts came with it. The southern part of Oklahoma City was hit repeatedly, with homes scattered like broken matches. Somehow, there were no deaths here, though property damage went far into the millions. Wilburton was not so fortunate. Neither was Sapulpa, Soper, and a dozen other small towns. The pleasant month of May was worst. In that month alone, there were 61 tornadoes reported on the ground in Oklahoma. 31 persons were killed and 241 others injured. Property damage in May amounted to $6.5 million. The grim total for 1960 was 34 persons killed and 314 injured, and the Weather Bureau recorded 99 funnels on the ground. This was not a record number of confirmed tornadoes. We had more in 55, 56, and 57, but it was the greatest number of deaths since 1947 and the second greatest property damage total in history. More than one Oklahoman could sympathize with one farmer who came up out of his storm cellar, looked around his storm-racked farm, and commented,
"Well, I guess all these buildings blew away. They were gone when I come out."
As the Weather Bureau's tornado research continues, perhaps one day we will find a way of preventing at least the tragic loss of life. One thing for sure, without the Weather Bureau's warnings and the hard work of our own weather staff, the loss of life would have been much higher.
Money talks, and it also makes news. For a report on Oklahoma's economy in this first year of the soaring 60s, here's newsman Ernie Schultz.
Like most other states, Oklahoma's economy didn't exactly soar this year, but it didn't sag much either. The FAA Center here in Oklahoma City continued to grow, training thousands of students from all over the world. In southwestern Oklahoma, construction was booming on a complex of Atlas missile launchers, all buried deep in the ground surrounding Altus Air Force Base. Military spending continued high at Tinkerfield, Fort Sill, and Clinton Sherman Air Force Base. The ribbon was cut on Oklahoma's largest suburban shopping center one cold day in March, and Penn Square joined the ranks of dozens of others serving the sprawling suburbs. Downtown merchants waited until warmer weather to launch their counterattack. Then they turned Main Street into a flower-lined mall, complete with wandering troubadours and sidewalk artists. A much more serious problem came to downtown merchants during the summer when Negro citizens reopened their drive to obtain equal rights at several lunch counters and restaurants. After sit-in demonstrations failed to win concessions from the owners, the Negroes organized an economic boycott of all downtown stores. Pickets appeared carrying signs appealing to residents to avoid the stores. Other cities experienced the same kind of problem, and the boycotts were much more successful in cities like Nashville than they were here. There was no violence, no mass arrests, and this seemed to act as a damper on the demonstrations. Negro leadership was divided also, and the issue has subsided for the moment. Elsewhere, the Oklahoma Economic Barometer seems poised. Construction is proceeding on Keystone and Eufaula dams, both huge projects, but in the economy as a whole, the indicators can be read both ways, and the Oklahoma businessman is still trying to decide whether we are going into or coming out of a recession.
Another big factor in Oklahoma City's economic picture this year was the long and very complicated story of the Atoka Water Trust. Reporter Bill Beebe has drawn the unwelcome assignment of explaining this involved and legalistic hassle in a period of 2 minutes. Good luck, Bill.
In the year 1960, the Oklahoma City Atoka Water Trust project and City Hall's battle to finalize the necessary preliminaries before starting construction has provided as much copy and news film as any city reporter can remember in a long time. News of the $65 million project was first made public on April the 12th, 1960. The same day, opponents appeared en masse to contest the program that would take until the year 2000 to complete. The interest on the bonds alone would be more than the cost of the project. The rich would get richer, and the average man and his son's son would have to foot the bill. We didn't need it. Besides, the contract with Bill Gill and the Atoka contractors blocked competitive bidding. These were some of the objections. The suit was filed to block the project. The Supreme Court was asked to assume original jurisdiction. 80 Oklahoma City businessmen intervened mostly because of the no competitive bidding. The state's high court asked that depositions be taken in district court, and for 2 weeks, depositions were taken. Then the court looked at the depositions, and they decided, after hearing oral arguments, not to take original jurisdiction in the matter. The matter then was to go back to the district court. However, it never got that far. Proponents and opponents got together, and they finally agreed to do away with the objectionable plan and start from scratch. With this, the Oklahoma City Municipal Improvement Authority was formed, and 4 trustees were named. They were Shel Sterling, the city manager, Ed Moeller, the city attorney, and 2 city businessmen, Richard Camp and R. Lewis Barton. The new trust was drawn, one that called for competitive bidding, and the 4 men began new studies of engineers' reports and feasibility reports. Just as the project was getting underway for the second time, Walter Harrison, a local publisher, launched a new suit accusing the trustees of acting imprudently in their administration and objecting to the bond indenture. A district court ruled in favor of the trustees. Harrison appealed, and once again, the matter was before the Supreme Court. After arguments, the judges took the case under for consideration. Meanwhile, Senator Walt Allen of Chickasha and Merton Bullough of Oklahoma City, an Oklahoma City attorney, tried to intervene, still claiming that there was no competitive bidding. The 2 men contended that steel pipe could be competitive. Because of the steel versus concrete controversy, 1 member of the trust, Richard Camp, resigned in protest. All maneuvers failed, and on December the 19th, the Supreme Court okayed the plan. Pipeline was on its way. Throughout the battle, proponents had insisted that the water from Atoka was necessary if Oklahoma City is to attract industry and keep up with the 20th century. As for the rate increase, which will be 50%, the men in favor of the project claim that in a matter of time, the rates will, after going up, go down and be even lower than they are now. Besides that, a special fund that will be fed by the increase will, they claim, provide more funds, more revenues for the city. To this, the opponents say that's just another way of increasing taxes. That, Dick, is a rather skimpy look at the Atoka pipeline story. Regardless of what it is or what it does, or how much it costs or who pays for it, construction will begin about March the 1st, 1961.
While Oklahomans were weighted down with those problems, they were also playing. For a wrap-up on what they played and some of the final scores, here's Ross Porter.
3 state wrestlers, Doug Blubaugh, Shelby Wilson, and Terry McCann, all won Olympic gold medals in wrestling at Rome for Uncle Sam. They were the only Americans to win gold medals in wrestling. In the college competition in wrestling in 1960, Oklahoma State won both dual meets over Oklahoma. But the Cowboys had eligibility problems, and the Sooners came on to win the Big 8 and NCAA titles. It was also the year in which the NCAA placed the University of Oklahoma on indefinite probation. When athletic director Bud Wilkinson returned from a trip to Hawaii, shortly after the penalty was assessed, WKY-TV was there.
The university's position has been one of wanting to cooperate with the NCAA and of trying to cooperate with the NCAA, and I'm sure that we will continue to do so.
It was also a good year for golf in Oklahoma. Glenn Fowler of Oklahoma City won his 3rd straight amateur trophy, something that hadn't been done in 40 years. When the pros came to town, Art Wall ripped apart the Oklahoma City Twin Hills Country Club with 14 under par rounds of 65 and 63 to lead the nation in qualifying for the National Open. Later that same week, 4 players were tied for the lead in the 72-hole Oklahoma City Open with only 5 holes to play. But Gene Littler birdied the last 3 holes to win the $30,000 tournament. Arnold Palmer finished 3rd behind Wall. In basketball, the Phillips 66ers won the National Industrial Basketball title, but lost in the AAU playoffs. The Oklahoma Sooners were the only member of the state Big 4 in college ball to win more than they lost, but they finished in 3rd place in the Big 8 Conference, 1 game behind Kansas and Kansas State. Enid and Stillwater won the big high school prep titles in '60. In track, a technicality cost OU's J.D. Martin the world's pole vaulting record. After apparently clearing 15 feet 9 3/4 inches, it found that only the bar was placed in the wrong position. OU also broke Kansas's stranglehold and won the indoor track for the Big 8 Conference. In baseball, the Tulsa Oilers won the Texas League playoffs and beat Mexico City in the intra-league playoffs also. In tennis, Gene Land of Oklahoma City continued to be the best amateur in the state, but young Billy Higgins of Lawton showed tremendous improvement. In the fall, OU's football fortunes dipped to an all-time low under Bud Wilkinson as the opposition toughened up. OSU played for the first time in the Big 8 Conference, but both the Sooners and Cowboys could win only 3 games this fall. Tulsa was better with a 5-5 record, but the real state powerhouse was Langston, which won 10 straight games, extended a winning streak to 16, and went to the Orange Blossom Football Bowl, where Florida A&M spoiled things with a 40-26 victory. Midwest City, Seminole, Choctaw, and Beaver won the state high school divisions. And that was the Oklahoma sports picture in 1960.
During this year of 1960, the reporters of WKY television exposed over 750,000 feet of film in bringing you the news 3 times a day. Just to look at all this film once would take you over 2 weeks of 24-hour-a-day viewing. One of our jobs is to condense this mountain of material and make it understandable so that on any day of the year, you can turn to your television receiver and learn what is happening to you, your neighbors, and your community. This is not an easy task, and it is made more difficult almost daily by some people who seek to deny the public's right to know. This year, television was excluded from our state courts because our lawyers objected. You and I are poorer because of this exclusion, for if the day should ever come when you cannot turn to your television, radio, or newspaper for a complete picture of your community, you will have lost any chance of control over that community, and all manner of abuses will be launched in your name. The news you see each day on WKY television is produced by a wonderful group of reporters, some you never see. I'd like for you to meet them all. Ernie Schultz, Cliff Adkins, Bob Grant, Bill Beebe, Scott Berner, Jim Williams, Virgil Dominic, Nelson Robinson, Houston Hall, Gene Allen, and Jerry Manning. This was their show, and this is their product, instant, day-to-day history. Your history. History which maketh the young man to be old without either wrinkles or gray hairs, privileging him with the experience of age without either the infirmities or the inconveniences thereof. Thank you, and Happy New Year to you all.